it's strange. About 6 years ago, I worked from a Glasgow depot, and Newton Village was a 10-hour shift.
One way?
Oh, one way. Now, 6 years later, 7 years, they expect the same trip there and back for the same hours. Where's it going to end?
A lot of road haulage begins in Glasgow. Heavy transport is big business. Already 85% of Britain's goods are moved by road. But it's also a cutthroat business, and some companies say that competitors steal their trade by breaking every rule in the book. They claim they're losing out in the transport boom simply because they obey the law. They complain that lorry men are bribed with cash bonuses to break all speed limits and drive for longer than the 10 hours which the law permits. Argyllshire, just west of Glasgow. Here the drivers of British Road Services depots fear for their jobs. They feel threatened by the cowboy tactics of their rivals. BRS, the publicly owned part of the transport industry, observes the letter of the law. Davy Boyd has been with BRS for 20 years.
British Road Services are tied to operate within the terms of the law. And for us in British Road Services to do the same job as what the Campbelltown haulage contractors are doing at the moment with one driver, it takes British Road Services 2 or 3 drivers to do exactly the same job.
To check his claims, we went to Campbelltown and followed one of the private lorries leaving town at 7 a.m. This lorry belongs to West Coast Motor Services, a private contractor, and it set off on the 135-mile trip to Glasgow. It's a winding and difficult road, but this community is without a rail link and totally dependent on road transport. After 2¼ hours, he's reached Araka. So far, the driver has averaged 43 miles an hour on roads where commercial vehicles are restricted to a maximum of 40. But soon he faces a time-consuming schedule of deliveries and collections in the congested streets of Glasgow, where he arrives at 10:15. We followed and filmed most of his stops in the city from his first delivery of the morning at Ingram Street until 3:15 in the afternoon. The driver worked on through the lunch break. He'd now spent more time in the city than on the open road. The driver didn't make it back to base that night until 7:30, a 12-and-a-half-hour day.
There's at least a dozen firms operating in Argyllshire that are getting away with it. And their drivers are working 14 and 15 hours a day. We know this. We know this by the amount of traffic that we're losing. British Road Services are tied hand and foot to the Road and Rail Traffic Acts and the 1968 Transport Act. And so also should the private haulage contractors, but they ignore it. They ignore it completely.
We timed him on a previous trip when he took 16 hours to complete his journey, and we found 6 other private haulage companies in Argyll who were overrunning the hours by similar margins. Again, Davy Boyd.
We're losing trade, and there's a threat that some of the depots will be closed. And I would say that the Campbelltown depot would be one of these depots that would come under this threat. Now, it must be remembered that a man in Campbelltown losing his job, but a man in Campbelltown, if he loses his job in the British Road Service, he hasn't got a job. He's finished.
Faced with our findings, West Coast Motor Services later said they would shorten the driver's day. Argyll is a remote area and its companies are small, but what happens there might happen elsewhere on a larger scale. So we went to Glasgow to check on the big contractors who compete on the national routes. First, we got ourselves a fully laden 32-ton lorry and then hired an experienced driver to test out some of the longest trunk routes in Britain. We could now investigate whether some of the most heavily used long-distance routes were done inside the law. Neil Stobo is on the Transport Industry Training Board and has been driving heavy goods lorries for nearly 20 years. Tonight, World in Action takes to the roads to investigate the transport business and test the limits of the law. The first test we set Neil Stobo was the route from Glasgow to the port of Southampton on the south coast, a run regularly done by lorries in one day. So we gave Neil Stobo just one day to try and drive the 450 miles. However, we also insisted that he stick to every speed limit and then stop when his legal limit of 10 hours driving was reached.
If an A-class road was flat and there was no hills, no places you had to slow down, then 40 mile an hour could be maintained. But unfortunately, there's hills, there's bends, and then your speed dropped. So this all adds up to more time.
31 miles in 40 minutes outside Glasgow. Neil Stobo is on the A74, the main road south to England, with a speed limit of 40 miles an hour for heavy lorries.
It's just a job and that's all. Unless you like driving, of course. Now anybody's been driving for any more than, I'd say, 10 years. They're no thrill, it's just hard work and nothing more.
Our test lorry has crossed the border into England. The M6 will take Neil Stobo right the way through to Birmingham, a distance of 200 miles. He can now increase his speed to 60 miles an hour. But first there's the long haul to the top of Shack. "147 miles and 4 3/4 hours driving time down the road, and the lorry is passing through the Lake District. In obedience to the law, our driver has had the break which every lorry driver must take within 5.5 hours of starting work. Neil Stobo sets off again to complete the test we've set him to get to Southampton in 10 hours driving time. Crossing over the Manchester Ship Canal near Warrington, our 32-ton lorry has completed 222 miles in 6.5 hours. "280 miles from Glasgow, and with 3/4 of his legal driving day behind him, Neil Stobo is into the Midlands just north of Birmingham. More than half his journey so far has been on motorway.
We're on the motorway now, just over 4 hours. Beginning to feel a bit tired.
Can you put down the whole way?
Yeah, my right leg feels as if it's got ready to drop off.
Well, you try and sit in a fixed position for 10 hours a day. See how hard it is for you. Well, you think it in the motor with the bumps, bad roads at times that we have to operate on. It's tiring, both mentally and physically.
After 332 miles, our driver is now on the M5 near Worcester, with only 50 minutes left to complete his journey to Southampton. The test run to Southampton has ended, in the middle of Gloucestershire. Neil Stobo kept to all the speed limits and took his regulation meal breaks, but he hasn't reached his target. World in Action's lorry has finally stopped on the A435. Southampton and the sea are still 100 miles further down the road, a good 3 hours driving time. So Neil Stobo only managed to cover 350 miles in his legal 10 hours.
How do you feel after that journey?
How do I look? It's more like, no, definitely exhausted. I think every bone in my body is screaming, and muscle as well. My eyes, you can hardly keep them open. No. Exhausted, completely exhausted. How anybody could do this for 5 or 6 days a week, beyond me. 350 miles, roughly 7 hours on a motorway. No. Anybody that tries to run to Southampton in 10 hours, it's crazy.
Can the journey from Glasgow to Southampton be legally done?
No. Not if you observe all the speed limits within the A-class roads, and even doing the maximum on the motorway. It can't be done. Not in one state it can. Maybe 2, but not 1. I'm about 3 miles from Cheltenham. And this is as far as I can go, legal. And still have another 100 miles to go to Southampton. No, definitely not. That can't be done legally.
One company which regularly does the trip from Clydeside to Southampton is McKelvey's Transport of Paisley near Glasgow. McKelvey's compete with the publicly owned BRS. Both companies carry combine harvesters from Kilmarnock in Scotland to the docks of Southampton. The difference is that some of McKelvey's men do the run in a day and get paid for it. These timesheets show that McKelvey's men made the trip south in one day and returned to Scotland the next, from Southampton and back to the combine harvester factory at Kilmarnock. On a productivity deal, the 448 miles allow the driver to claim 18 hours pay in addition to 2 hours loading, a total of 20 pay hours. The number of hours actually driven is not recorded. Two men from McKelvey's, Tom Summers, the shop steward, and Arthur Davern, a driver, faced two union men from publicly owned British Road Services, driver Bob Grant and shop steward Willie Gilchrist.
We're hauling thousands of pounds worth of stuff over the border.
But why is productivity...
For £22.50.
Why is productivity wrong? I mean,
Well, it must be wrong. It's lethal.
Is it? Well, this government and the last government, both Labour and Tory administrations, keep telling us, bump up the productivity, we must be more productive or we sink as a nation, okay? So you get your man walking into the work in Dagenham and he's doing a bit of spot welding and he goes bang, 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 and he does that twice as fast and makes some more money, okay? So instead of going from Glasgow to Manchester, we now go to Glasgow, Manchester and back again. We have got to do this. Don't know about your agreement, but our agreement is 250 miles a day. 25 miles an hour is an ordinary. After that, an hour at time and a half.
Yes,
Okay. So until you have done that 250 miles, you don't make a penny.
That's right. You're on your basic wage.
And you may be, Jesus Christ, 250 miles away from your home. You haven't made a penny. You could have made.
McKelvey's depot, our own lorry, and Neil Stobo leaving to test out another of their runs. This time it's Paisley to Newton-le-Willows near Manchester and back, a round trip of more than 400 miles. McKelvey's men make bonus money almost every mile of the way back to Scotland. The roads are dry, and Neil Stobo has ideal conditions for night driving. With nighttime traffic from Paisley, there's a slow journey at 30 miles an hour through the streets of Glasgow and its suburbs. Then 73 miles of A74, where the speed limit for lorries is 40. The M6 back onto a 60 limit, and the drivers have a chance to make up time to the Newton turnoff, where they have 3 miles of town running at 30 to reach their depot. Total, 222 miles.
No, you get drivers exceeding the motorway speed limit of 60 miles an hour, falsifying their log sheet, booking on 2 and 3 hours after they've started. It sounds as if the drivers is at fault here. But basically, most of the companies, if you're not prepared to do this, then you work for a very small wage. The companies use every trick in the book to bribe drivers, if you like, to ignore these rules and regulations. They do it quite simple, by money. If he's prepared to break the law, he can get as much as 80, 90 a week.
The 219-mile trip to the Newton turnoff took Neil Stobo 5 hours and 38 minutes. The bonus earned by a McKelvey's driver on trips like these can be very tempting. It certainly proved too much for one of the BRS men who came along to voice his complaint about McKelvey's methods. He announced he intended to join them.
I'm with the BRS just now, and I'm packing in the BRS, and I'm starting with McKelvey. Your boys. I'm starting with McKelvey because I'm not getting a living wage from the BRS, and I think I can get it if I go to McKelvey. Obviously, the BRS is not going to pay the money for the work that's attached to the job. And if we are going to hike over across that border, we want money for it. You boys are getting it. You can't beat them, join them.
I don't see why you should move to the BRS to go to McKelvey. You're going to do the same job. How are you going to...
£20 a week difference, Willie. That's the reason I'm moving.
Neil Stobo is now on his way back to Scotland with only 4 hours driving time left. He's now done 226 miles in 5 hours and 50 minutes. In fact, he can now only do the journey in a night if he breaks the speed limit on the way home.
It's not really a life. You've no home life as such. If you're trunking, it's sleep. Get up for work, sleep, hospital for it, that's all. You're continually tired. I know I was when I was on distance. And trunk, I could never get used to it. Definitely, night driving didn't agree with me. And as I say, there's no social life.
380 miles was Neil Stobo's final total when he stopped in Lanarkshire at 6:30 a.m.
So how have you done?
Well, that's the Paisley, Newton Willis trunk. I'm afraid it can't be done in 10 hours. If it was motorway all the way, I suppose it could be done. But sticking to the regulations of the A74, no. I'm about 50 miles short, between 45 and 50 short. An hour and a half running time. That's not allowing for the traffic in Glasgow. No, I'm afraid not.
To compare McKelvey's regular schedules with our own test, we followed a number of vehicles in one of their nightly convoys from Paisley to Newton. We photographed this driver at 8 p.m. on Monday, July the 2nd, when he was 10 minutes out of his depot heading for Newton. At Newton, he switched trailers and took a break of only 5 minutes instead of the legal half hour. He was back in Glasgow, half an hour away from home, at 5:20 the next morning. By bending the rules, he made it in 10 hours. This driver also passed on his way south at the same time that night. He kept up with the convoy leader to Newton and turned round just as quickly. At 5:30 the next morning, he was back in Glasgow. His running time, 10 hours, 10 minutes. This driver was a quarter of an hour behind the others leaving Glasgow and a full hour and a quarter behind at Newton. But he kept his turnaround down to about 20 minutes and was back in Glasgow at 7 the next morning. His running time, 11 hours, 25 minutes. This driver was the slowest of the night. Southbound through Glasgow at 8:05, he didn't reach Newton till 20 to 2 in the morning. He took 20 minutes to unhitch and load again and had only a 10-minute break in the cab of his lorry. He was back in Glasgow at 8:05 next morning. His final running time will be nearly 13 hours. We've no way of knowing how long the lorry drivers took checking their vehicles in and out at Paisley. They're paid for this run by productivity bonus. BRS shop steward Willie Gilchrist asked the McKelvey's men how it was done.
10 years ago, our own firm used to get paid 13 hours Paisley to Manchester. Now they get paid 18 hours Paisley to Newton Willows and back.
It's the same as Manchester, by the way.
They get paid 18 hours, but how long do they drive? Is it a 10-hour shift?
It can be done inside the time.
Can it be done legally?
It can be done inside the time.
Can it be done legally?
It can be done legally, but it can
Well,
be
how
done.
do
Well,
they-
theoretically it could be done now, but
The point is, how do we allow this to transpire?
because of productivity, the thing is, if a man's getting a decent pay at the end of the week, he's not going to bother too much about the law.
Who decides what is legal and illegal? Is it the traffic commissioners? Is it the companies? Is it the government? Who does it?
This is the point.
What is legal for Salmonison is no legal for McKelvey. What is legal for McKelvey is no legal for the BRS.
What I'm trying to point out is there's certain companies, private companies, including McKelvey, have got certain runs from A to B, from Glasgow to Newton Willis and back, which is more than 400 miles, more or less.
But look, we have laws that say what is legal.
But what I'm trying to say is, Tommy,
we
is...
have legal speed limits, right? With speed limits, there's only so much you can do in one day legally, right? And nobody, every haulier in the country exceeds that, the gross amounts. It can't be done legally.
Enforcing the 1968 Transport Act is now the job of the inspectors of the Department of the Environment. Traffic police are used to flag down commercial vehicles and direct them to the scene of roadside checks.
You just rock the steering backwards and forwards, please. You just put your foot in the brake, please. Off! You do have an L leak at the offside front brake chamber, driver.
Well, that's a new chamber fitted last night.
Yes, it appears to be quite new.
The
The leak is actually at the inlet pipe to the chamber.
That's bad.
This is instant justice. This lorry has faulty brakes, and the driver would commit an offence if he tried to carry on driving. The lorry must stay here until repaired or towed away.
If you could just sign along there, driver, please. This prohibition comes into effect immediately, which means it's illegal to drive the vehicle on the public highway until the defect has been rectified.
This test lorry from the Road Transport Industry Training Board, legally loaded with 18 tons, travelling at 30 miles an hour, makes an emergency stop and brakes in time. The inspectors also check for overloading. In 1971, 1 lorry in 5 stopped was overloaded, but in central Scotland, the average fine was about £5. The test lorry, now overloaded by 3 tons, demonstrates the danger. There's increasing concern about the role of lorries in fatal road crashes. Two recent surveys are disturbing. The Road Research Laboratory's latest figures show that 50% of car driver and passenger deaths came after collisions involving heavy lorries. The Accident Hospital at Birmingham, a major casualty station for M6 victims, estimates the figure at 40%. Nationally, this death rate would account for the lives of 1,000 motorists and their passengers every year. But there are only 194 inspectors to check the logbooks which all Britain's lorry drivers must carry. With widespread fiddling, their most effective weapon is a silent check, secretly noting numbers, locations and times, then calling in logbooks weeks later. In this way, the driver doesn't realise where he's been spotted, and therefore doesn't know which part of an illegal journey to disguise. This is vehicle LVA 366L, fuelling on a Tuesday night at the depot of Sam Anderson Haulage at Newhouse near Glasgow. We've chosen this vehicle at random for our own silent check. We don't know his route or destination, but he left the depot by 10 o'clock headed south. Instead of inspectors' notebooks, we used film cameras to record his journey. When we next spot him at junction 44 on the M6 at Carlisle, it's 10 minutes past midnight. We drive south in search of the lorry loaded with steel rods. We find him here at 1:30 on Wednesday morning. 3.5 hours on the road, and the driver is taking a break at Killington Lake Service Area on the M6 in the Lake District. But he's sound asleep in a bench behind the driver's seat as we film him. He keeps his head down for a few hours before waking and setting off at 4:15 a.m. Anderson's Haulage have a depot in Birmingham, and it's possible he's headed there. He makes good time south of Manchester until he stops again. This time he pulls in at Knutsford Services at 6:15. Even the driver of LVA 366L must answer the calls of nature, and he stops long enough to have a cup of tea as well before setting off again 15 minutes later. He now roars off down the motorway, apparently towards Birmingham, but we lose him as he sweeps off the M6 towards the M5 in the Midlands. We check his Birmingham depot, and sure enough, he turns up at 10:15. His load of steel has gone. He must have stopped to make a delivery before coming here. That helps account for the length of time he took to catch up with us. Still, it's more than 12 hours and 300 miles since he clocked on. He should be calling it a day. Even the time he spent sleeping in his cab, he was not legally off duty. But he's preparing to put another load on his trailer, and he leaves the depot at 11:20 in the morning, only partly loaded. We lost contact with him again in the suburbs of Birmingham when he appeared to be still working after a 13.5-hour shift. We headed back towards Scotland and waited patiently on the M6 in Westmoreland. We'd almost given up hope when LVA 366L reappeared at junction 39 at 9:15 at night. He had a bigger load and must have stopped to make another pickup. By the time we checked him back to Anderson's depot in Scotland, it was past midnight on Thursday morning. To keep up with this one man behind the wheel of LVA 366L, World in Action had to use 4 cars and 6 different drivers between Tuesday night and Thursday morning. By that time, our interest had turned to admiration for a remarkable display of driving endurance. Unfortunately, it was a 26-hour performance, which took the Andersons driver, like so many others, well beyond the limits of the law.